Hello, I'm Christopher. It's my mission to give you bite-sized pieces of information that are going to help you learn a skill quickly. Today we'll be looking at Docker volumes as well as multi-stage builds. We're just playing around, so let's run a little local container registry, which runs as a container itself. Pretty cool, right? I'll go ahead and drop the link to this in the description so you can play with this yourself. So we can tag our simple server so that it can now go to our local registry, which is listening on localhost 5000, and we'll call it simple server latest. Then we're going to push it to this new local registry. And you'll see this behavior will kind of repeat itself with every single registry that you're going to use. So now that this registry now has our new image, let's go ahead and test a pull on it. And that works as expected. So now this all works great and all, but we have one problem. If I go ahead and I stop and remove this registry, the next time I go ahead and try and run this registry again, and I attempt to pull, our image won't be there. That's no good. Let's make this data persist. So let's play around with Docker volumes. Let's go and create our own Docker volume called registry-data. This will be a nice home for our images. So let's stop and remove our current registry. If you're not familiar with the add operator, everything on the left-hand side of the add operator has to be successful before we can run anything on the right-hand side. So Docker stop registry has to be successful before we can run docker rm remove the registry. So let's try mount this new volume in our image. We're going to use -v to target our volume and say we're going to mount it to the varlib registry directory inside the container, which is the default location that all these images will be stored. And then we'll push our image to it. And once our image is now there, we can go ahead and do a pull, and that should work as expected. But when we test our scenario where we stop and remove the registry now, and we run this with the same volume mounted, now when we run a Docker pull after the fact, this data is now persisted. Bada boom, bada bing. Our image is there. But I'm curious. I'd like to see what this data looks like. So we can use a local directory, which is also handy if you're doing development, by the way. So let's make a folder called registry. And we're going to mount this volume with -v as well to our Docker container. Now we can use a relative path or an absolute path, which is the whole path. And we can mount that into our container. And when we go ahead and push our image now, after it is done pushing it, we should see something very interesting. Now remember, this could be with code that you're running in a container or anything. But in our case, we can go ahead and see what is actually in this registry. It's a Docker subfolder, and if we look even deeper, we can go as far as seeing all the images, layers inside of this registry. That's pretty cool. Now this is all great and all, but the problem is we have an image that is a little bit too big for no reason. Let's slim this down with a multi-stage build. So our current Docker file looks a little bit like this. We want to change this to use multiple stages, and that'll look a little bit like this. Feel free to pause the video, but I'll go ahead and explain this. We use the original Golang image as our builder image, and we label it as such. You'll see at this next section on line 11, we use from scratch, and that is a special empty image in Docker. And then we copy from our builder image that we've labeled from its GoBin server into the GoBin server of this scratch image, and we run the command of our server as usual. So we're going to go ahead and build this using the -f parameter to specify our docker.multistage file. And while it's pulling all of these different layers, you'll kind of notice when it's done this next build portion that it'll run all these steps, but the last thing it runs is it goes from scratch. And the significance of that is that since we are compiling a static binary, we don't need Golang in the container. All of the dependencies the app needs are compiled within the binary. So if we go ahead and list this now, we'll see that there's a pretty significant difference here. Now that's a lot smaller, but does this even still work? Let's give that a test. Let's run this container. Now that's running, let's go ahead and test that our container actually still works. We get our hello world, and we've got our query param that works. Same result, much smaller size. Thank you for your time. I hope this bite of information has given you everything you need to work with Docker volumes and multi-stage builds. If you found value out of this, go ahead and like and subscribe and show your love in the comments. Then you can jump into this portal for the next video.